She didn't look at me when she turned the key. Just the soft click of the lock, her hand resting on the brass handle for a beat too long, like she was deciding whether to open it again or leave it shut. The room around us was quiet in a way that made every breath sound louder than it should. I don't know why it felt like a confession, standing there with her, but it did. I'd come to return a book, one I barely read, just an excuse to see her again. She was behind the main desk like always, hair pinned up, glasses low on her nose, not bothered by anyone or anything. I'd watched people try to get her attention, small talk, polite smiles, but she gave them nothing more than what the job required. I didn't get much either, not at first. Just a glance, a pause, and the kind of silence that said she was thinking but wouldn't tell me what about. Today, though, she didn't send me off with a nod like she usually did. She asked me to follow her to the back room to drop the book where the returns were sorted. Her voice wasn't loud, just steady, and I don't think she realized how close she stood when she said it. The hallway to the private archive room was narrow, lined with old paintings and lamps that flickered like they were tired. I could hear nothing but our footsteps, hers more certain than mine. She smelled faintly like eucalyptus and old paper, warm, clean, familiar in a way it shouldn't be. When we stepped inside, she closed the door, then locked it. No explanation. No warning. Just that sound, the lock sliding into place like a held breath. I stood there, not sure if I should ask why. She didn't seem tense. She didn't seem rushed. She stepped past me to set a stack of journals on the wooden table in the corner, and the brush of her arm against mine was so deliberate I felt it long after she moved away. I don't think she meant to touch me. Or maybe she did. I couldn't tell. She was older than me, mid-40s, maybe, but there was nothing distant about her. She didn't move like someone worrying about how she was being seen. She moved like someone who already knew. Confident, but there was something underneath it too. Something softer she kept tucked behind her careful posture and unreadable expression. She finally looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes were darker up close, sharp but tired in a way that made them feel honest. I forgot to breathe for a moment. "You're here early," she said. I almost laughed, because I wasn't. I came at the same time every week. But she'd never acknowledged it before. I shrugged, trying not to sound like I'd been waiting for her to notice. Didn't think that mattered. "It doesn't," she replied, but she didn't look away. There was dust in the air that caught in the strip of afternoon light coming through the small, high window. The hum of the old vent filled the silence between us. She walked toward the rolling ladder leaning against one of the tall shelves, and I followed her without thinking. When she reached for a book on a higher shelf, her hand slipped just slightly. Not enough to drop anything, but enough that my instinct was to steady her. My fingers touched her waist before I could stop myself. Warm. Firm. Real. She didn't pull away. She didn't say thank you. She just glanced over her shoulder, the corner of her mouth barely moving, and whispered, almost like a rule being broken, "No talking." Before I could respond, there was a sound outside the door, quick footsteps and a voice, low but urgent. The handle turned once. And stopped. The handle stopped moving, but neither of us stepped back. She didn't turn toward the door. Didn't seem startled. Just waited, still as if she'd already decided that whoever was out there didn't matter enough to open it for. The footsteps faded. Silence folded in around us again. She moved first, slipping out of the space between me and the shelf. The distance she put there was small, but it felt deliberate, like she needed it to remember something I didn't know yet. I'd seen her outside the library once, sitting alone at a cafe across the street, stirring a tea she never drank. No wedding ring. No company. No hurry. Just that same quiet she wore like a coat. I remember wondering if she preferred being left alone or if she'd just gotten used to it. My friends joked about me spending time here so much. Said I liked the silence or the smell of old books. They didn't know about the way she looked at me sometimes, like she was trying not to. They wouldn't understand it anyway. A woman her age, a guy my age, people talk. Or worse, they don't talk at all, they just look. She carried a stack of journals to the table and started sorting them without asking me to help. I stepped beside her anyway and took half. She didn't tell me not to. When did you start working here? I asked, keeping my voice low, not sure if talking was still forbidden. She didn't glance up. A long time ago. That's not an answer. She paused, fingers resting on the spine of a book. Then, without looking at me, before you were born. I couldn't tell if she meant it literally or just to put space between us again. My parents split when I was 11, I said, not sure why I offered that. Libraries were quiet. Peaceful. I guess I never shook that off. That made her look. Not soft, not sympathetic, just aware in a way that made my chest feel too tight. You prefer quiet people? She asked. I notice them more, I said. Her gaze lingered longer than it should have. Then she stepped past me to shelve another book, and the edge of her shoulder brushed mine as she passed. It wasn't an accident. But she didn't stop either. Someone must have loved her once. Maybe still did. Or maybe someone hurt her and she never gave them another chance to try. The way she closed herself off wasn't cold, just practiced. I wasn't supposed to stay this long, she said quietly, placing a book back in its slot. Thought it was temporary. Then the days turned into years. Why did you stay? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She looked up at the high window instead, at the weak bit of light stretching across the wall. It's easier to keep things in order here than outside. I didn't push. She didn't owe me more than that. But when she turned back, she was closer than I expected, close enough that her breath warmed the space between us. You come here more than anyone, she said. I like it here. Do you? She murmured. Or do you like being watched and not questioned? The words settled in my throat before I could answer. Her hand moved then, just slightly, fingertips grazing my sleeve before pulling back, like she'd touched fire without meaning to. She didn't apologize. Neither did I. We stood there, not speaking, not stepping away, just suspended in something unnamed but growing heavier by the second. And neither of us moved first. She was the one who broke the stillness, but not by stepping away. She tilted her head slightly, like she'd just remembered something she wasn't supposed to forget, and the moment thinned between us. I heard footsteps again, closer this time, heavier, paired with a voice calling her name from somewhere beyond the stacks. She didn't flinch, but I saw the shift in her posture, the way tension slid into her shoulders like an old habit returning. The voice was male. Familiar to her. Too familiar. She didn't move for the door. Instead, she reached for a nearby cart and nudged it with her foot, letting it roll a few inches as if that small sound explained our presence in here. Just work, nothing else. Nothing questionable. The voice called again, closer. Then the footsteps stopped outside the door. A hand rested briefly on the handle. My pulse clawed up my throat. She didn't look at me, but she lifted her hand, just slightly, fingers raised in a silent command, "Don't speak." The moment stretched. Then the footsteps faded, moving back down the corridor. She finally released a breath, quiet and measured. I wasn't sure if it was relief or disappointment. I should have stepped back then. Put space between us before she did. But neither of us moved. You shouldn't be here alone with me, she said, barely above a murmur. Not reprimanding, just acknowledging the truth neither of us had wanted to speak. Then tell me to leave, I said. Her eyes flickered over my face, not lingering, not soft, but there was something there that hadn't been before. Not invitation. Not permission. Something messier. You won't, she said. She was right. I didn't even pretend otherwise. She turned toward one of the tall shelves, reaching for a book she didn't actually need. I followed without thinking, closing the space between us like I'd been pulled. The air felt warmer here, narrower. I could smell her perfume, light, restrained, but close enough now that it moved with her breath. When she reached higher, the hem of her blouse shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of skin at her waist, just above the band of her skirt. I looked away too slowly. She noticed. Her gaze held me for a beat too long, then dropped to my mouth, just for a second, so fast I might have imagined it. But I didn't. "You're staring," she said. "You didn't look away," I answered. Silence again. Not empty, just waiting for something neither of us could name without breaking it. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to feel the heat from her body. Her breathing hitched, the smallest sound, then leveled out like she'd forced it back into place. "People will talk," she said quietly. "They already do," I replied. That made her laugh once under her breath, not amusement, not really. More like resignation wrapped in something dangerous. She glanced past me suddenly, eyes narrowing. I turned just as the door handle twitched again, but this time no one tried to open it. A shadow moved across the frosted glass panel, paused, then disappeared. She stepped back on instinct, and I caught her wrist before she fully withdrew. Not tight. Just enough to keep her from leaving the moment entirely. Her pulse was fast beneath my fingers. She didn't pull away. Didn't speak. Didn't look at the door again. "I should go," she whispered. But she didn't move. And I didn't let go. She didn't try to pull her wrist free. But she didn't step closer either. We were suspended in that thin space between impulse and restraint, and I could feel the tremor in her pulse under my thumb. She finally looked at me, really looked, and something in her expression wasn't guarded anymore. It was raw. Uncovered. Tired of pretending not to want what she clearly did. "This is a mistake," she said, voice softer than the words deserved. "Then why are you still here?" Her eyes flickered. That was the first crack. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved past me, slow and deliberate, until her back was to the table. She leaned against it like her legs needed the support. I followed, not touching her, but close enough that her breath brushed the base of my throat when she exhaled. "I'm not who you think I am," she said quietly. "Then tell me who you are." She gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You're too young to understand." That should have stung, but it didn't. "That's not an answer." She looked away then, toward the door, as if expecting judgment to walk in and catch us before we chose something we couldn't take back. Her fingers were curled around the edge of the table, knuckles pale. For the first time I noticed her hands weren't steady. "You think this ends well?" she asked. "I'm not thinking that far." "You should." I stepped closer, close enough that her knees almost brushed my legs. The afternoon light had shifted lower, stretching shadows across the room, turning the dust in the air into something golden and slow-moving. "Tell me to go," I said. She didn't. Her gaze met mine again. This time she didn't look away. There was something like anger there, but not at me. At herself. "I don't let people get close to me," she said. "You already have." Her jaw tightened. "And that's the problem." I lifted a hand, slowly, giving her every chance to stop me. She didn't move. My thumb brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it back behind her ear. Her breath caught, barely, but enough that I heard it. She turned her face slightly toward my hand, not quite nuzzling into the touch but not avoiding it either. When I lowered my hand, she caught my wrist before it fell away completely. Her touch was warm, hesitant, but intentional. "You have no idea what this would cost me," she whispered. "Then don't pay it alone." Her eyes searched mine, like she wanted to find a reason to believe me, or an excuse not to. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "Then what are you afraid of?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stepped forward, and I felt her body brush mine, lightly at first, then without apology. My hands found the edge of the table on either side of her, caging her in without touching her. She didn't flinch. Her voice dropped, barely a breath. "If I do this, I don't come back from it." My forehead hovered inches from hers, the air between us warmer than it should have been. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin, the faint tremble of restraint in her breathing. "You locked the door," I murmured. "You knew what you were doing." She didn't deny it. Her fingers slid up my forearm, so lightly it felt accidental, except she didn't stop. Her other hand braced against my chest, not pushing me away, just holding me there. I leaned in the slightest bit closer, close enough that my lips grazed the corner of her mouth, but not enough to call it a kiss. Her whisper was a confession and a warning tangled into one, "Don't make me choose." And then, before I could answer, someone knocked on the door. The knock on the door was followed by silence. Neither of us moved. My heart beat too fast, hammering against the restraint I was trying to force on myself. She pressed her palm flat against the table, as if bracing for something I couldn't see yet. The handle rattled again. Then a voice, familiar, too familiar, called softly from the hallway. "Are you in there?" Her lips parted slightly, caught between panic and composure. "Just a moment," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I stepped closer instinctively. She didn't resist, but she didn't encourage it either. The air was tight, every shallow breath counting, every glance charged. I noticed the tiny tremor in her fingers as she rested them on the edge of the table. "You should tell me," I said quietly, leaning in so the words brushed her ear. "Before someone else does." She looked at me then, and I saw it, something she hadn't shown before. A secret corner of fear, or shame, or both. "It's complicated," she said, voice low, almost choked. I swallowed. "I can handle complicated." She turned abruptly, as if deciding something. Her shoulder bumped against mine when she moved, just enough to leave a lingering warmth. She didn't step away. She didn't pull her hand back. I felt every subtle tremor, every pause in her breathing. "You need to know something," she said, and for the first time in all the weeks I'd been here, she made no effort to hide herself. "Someone overheard, someone knows more than they should." I froze. "Who?" Her eyes darted toward the frosted glass panel in the door, then back to mine. "It doesn't matter. What matters is, we can't act the way we want to, at least, not yet." Her words should have been a warning, but all I felt was the magnetic pull toward her, stronger than ever. The fear, the risk, the thrill, they tangled with something deeper in me. I stepped closer, careful not to touch her fully. My thumb brushed her arm as if by accident, and she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned just slightly into that tiny contact. Her breath hitched. My chest tightened. "I've wanted this for weeks," I admitted, voice low, more to steady myself than to confess. "Every time you're near, She lifted a hand to my chest before I could finish, palm warm, pressing lightly but insistently. "Don't," she said, a whisper that carried more need than caution. Her eyes locked on mine, wide, searching, vulnerable. And then the door rattled again. The handle moved, someone trying, perhaps, to check on us. We both froze. Her hand lingered on my chest, mine hovering near her waist. Neither of us pulled away. Neither of us spoke. "You have to decide," she murmured, so close that the words brushed my lips. "Do we step back, or do we risk everything?" Her chest rose and fell against the faint light, the trembling in her fingers matching my own. I knew that whatever choice we made now would change everything, our safe, quiet routine, the line between longing and surrender. I reached for her, slowly, just inches from touching. My lips hovered near hers. My pulse thundered in my ears. And then, the handle clicked. We were caught between what we wanted and what we feared, the space between us charged and trembling. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Yet we were closer than ever. The door stayed closed. The hall outside quieted again, leaving us alone with the hum of the ventilation and the sharp rhythm of our own hearts. The air between us was thick, charged in a way that made every breath feel like a decision. She didn't step back. Not really. Her body was angled toward mine, only inches apart, the faintest brush of her skirt against my leg sending a shiver up my spine. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the tremor in her hands. Every hesitation, every pause, was a conversation without words. "You don't have to," she whispered. Her voice was soft, a fragile thing balanced on a knife edge. "I can walk away." "We don't." I reached for her hand before she could finish. Not forcefully. Just enough to hold her, to anchor the storm swirling between us. Her fingers flexed against mine, uncertain but not rejecting. "I can't," I said. The words were low, steady, even though my chest felt like it might split in two. "Not anymore." She looked up, and I saw it, every careful barrier cracked, every calculated restraint gone. Her eyes were dark, open, searching mine for a signal she trusted, some proof that I wouldn't pull away. "Then we risk it," she murmured, leaning closer just enough that our foreheads brushed. The heat between us was immediate, a living pulse. I could feel her breath on my lips, smell the faint eucalyptus and paper clinging to her skin. Her hand slid up my arm, brushing the tense muscle there, and I caught her other hand, holding them both now. Not a trap. Not an ultimatum. A connection. A surrender. "I don't care what anyone thinks," I said. My voice was low, deliberate, trying to match the tremor I felt inside. "Not my age, not yours, not the world. You just want me," she finished for me. And she didn't say it like a question. She said it like a fact. And I believed it. We were closer now, bodies aligned without pushing, without moving past the edge. The hum of the library, the sunlight spilling through the high windows, the faint dust motes in the air, they all seemed to shrink around us, leaving just the two of us in a bubble of undeniable pull. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, letting my fingers linger. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch without needing more, trusting me with the small, human gesture. "I've waited too long," I said. "And I'm done pretending." Her lips parted slightly. She tilted her head just enough, a silent question lingering between us. And I knew the choice had been made, not because of logic, not because of fear, but because desire, long suppressed, finally outweighed every reason to stop. We didn't rush. Didn't fall into it recklessly. Just a quiet, messy surrender, a hand on a shoulder, a forehead resting against mine, breath mingling, hearts pounding in rhythm. The room didn't change. The world outside didn't matter. For the first time, we existed fully in the same space, fully aware of one another. Her eyes opened, and ours met. No words. No apologies. Just recognition. Understanding. We'd crossed the line, yes, but it wasn't reckless. It was human. And for the first time it felt right. We stayed that way, close, warm, suspended, letting the moment stretch into something neither of us could, or wanted to, break. The quiet was no longer empty. It was ours. The afternoon light softened, slipping through the tall library windows and pooling over the scattered books on the table. We sat side by side now, not speaking, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between us. No locks, no interruptions, just the two of us and the lingering warmth of what had passed. Her hand found mine, fingers threading together naturally, as if they had always belonged there. I didn't pull away. I didn't even think about it. The slight pressure of her thumb on my hand was steadying, grounding, and yet it sent warmth up my arm, up through my chest. "You really stayed," I said, voice low, hesitant. Not asking. More marveling. She gave a small smile, one that carried all the years she'd held herself apart, all the careful walls she'd built, finally softening in my presence. "I did," she said. Her thumb brushed mine again, light and deliberate. "I didn't know if I could, but I'm glad I did." We laughed quietly, together, a shared sound that felt like a small celebration. No one outside this room mattered right now. The age difference, the whispers of the world, the what-ifs, they were gone, irrelevant, replaced with this, a moment stretched long enough to sink into, fully and completely. I turned slightly, letting my shoulder rest against hers. She leaned into me, not tentatively, not uncertainly, just natural, the way two people who've finally chosen each other might. Her hair brushed my arm as she shifted closer. Her warmth pressed softly against me, not demanding, not urgent, just present. I was afraid, she murmured, almost to herself, that I'd never let someone in again. That I don't know, lose control of myself. You're not losing control, I said. You're letting someone in. That's not weakness. That's trust. She tilted her head and pressed her forehead against mine. Our eyes closed at the same time, breaths aligning. That tiny connection, a forehead kiss without lips, spoke louder than anything words could. Vulnerability, desire, relief, love, all tangled in one quiet gesture. We stayed like that for a long moment. Then she let out a soft sigh, a mixture of contentment and disbelief, and I tightened my hand around hers just slightly. Does this feel real? She asked. It does, I said. All of it. Every second we've waited, every glance, every touch, it led here. She smiled again, resting her head briefly against my shoulder. The warmth, the comfort, the sheer human intimacy of it, wrapped around me. No rush, no expectation, just the gentle presence of each other. I brushed my lips lightly against her temple, feeling her pulse there, slow and steady. She leaned closer, and we settled into the quiet satisfaction of being together at last, all doubts dissolved, all fears laid aside. The sun dipped lower, casting golden streaks across the room, and we stayed there, side by side, hand in hand, fully aware of each other, fully present. The world outside could wait. We didn't need anything else. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?